Hi, I'm Ashley Cooley, a birth, baby, and sleep specialist and mom of 3. There's so much information out there, right? This show is dedicated to helping you clear out the noise so you can figure out what will work best for your baby and your family. If you're looking to learn more about your baby, gain more confidence in your parenting, and get as much sleep as you can through it all, you've come to the right place. Bringing up baby is about to get a little easier. Hey everybody, Ashley here. Today we're doing something a little different, and I'm going to be sharing with you my firstborn daughter Stella's birth story. I've been asked a few times to share my daughter's birth stories a few times now, and I thought, why not? Why not? Because what I do share in prenatal classes are a few of the stories that I have. So I have 3 daughters. My oldest is 9.5. She'll be 10 in February. Wild. My middle child is 7.5, and my youngest is 4. And I do share parts of their birth stories in my prenatal classes for good reason, for educational purposes. So I figured I would lay out the groundwork for the full story for each of them. And we'll just be doing Stella today because they're enough of a story on their own that I'm not going to put them all in one episode. But I'm going to share them because I do think it's interesting looking back now when I had my first 2 daughters. I was not a childbirth educator. I was not a sleep consultant. I was not doing what I was doing today. And so I had very little, if any, enough information. I had very little information about having a baby, about caring for a baby. Anyway, that could be its own episode, how this all came to be. But when I look back on the experiences that I had and the questions and the way I was feeling and how my partner was able to or not able to help and support me during labor, when I look back on that now, knowing what I know now, I think it's kind of shocking. I think it's kind of the experience that I had having my 3rd daughter when I was a certified childbirth educator, when I had been teaching prenatal classes for a few years already, and I have been living in that world and had the experience of having birthed 2 other babies. That was a completely different experience, and can't wait to share that one with you too. But let's start with Stella. It was a cold day in February. Well, actually, yes, it was. And my labor started at about 4:30 in the morning. Yes, I remember it like it was yesterday. It started at 4:30 in the morning, woke me up. I was just a couple days past my due date. And by the time my husband woke up for the morning, I've been contracting a little bit here and there. I'm assuming that I'm in labor and it's the beginning, because what else would wake me up like that, But, so I told him, I think I'm in labor. He got really excited. And then I said, but you still need to go to work because I didn't want him sitting at home, kind of staring at me, looking at me, thinking, how you doing? What's going on? I just wanted to kind of do my own thing, maybe not think about it too much and just see what happens. Because I also didn't want to give my hopes up, even though I was a couple days past my due date, feeling some cramping every once in a while. I'm like, who knows? So he goes to work. I decide to clean the house because what else are you going to do in early labor? Oh my gosh. I clearly had that nesting instinct and was frantically cleaning the house because I'm thinking, all right, the baby's going to come. We're going to get some visitors. I'm going to get this all done. And I kind of just tired myself out. I look back on that now thinking I should have just been putting my feet up. Anyway, nothing wrong with doing a little bit of light housework, walking around, helping my labor progress. So by the time 10 o'clock, 10:30 rolled around, I called my doctor because I thought, okay, well, I'm still contracting. Maybe she can do an internal exam and check and see what's going on, because she had offered that to me. So usually when you're in labor, you don't necessarily go to your doctor. You would go to the hospital at a certain point and all that sort of stuff. Not to say that you couldn't call them, but my doctor had mentioned to me, if you are in labor or you think you're in labor, while I'm at the office and while I'm working, you're welcome to come here and we can squeeze you in and see what's going on, rather than going to the IWK, which is where we would go here in Halifax. So I drove myself to her office. It was a little bit of a drive. I can remember still contracting 6 times during that drive. But like I tell everybody in my prenatal classes, for most people, when labor's first starting out, it's kind of boring and you're feeling contractions usually, but they're not stopping you in your tracks. So I always make sure that I mention to people that even though I was driving, I wasn't putting anyone in danger. I wasn't putting myself in danger. I was having some mild period-like cramping that I've dealt with many times before, so I was fine. So I get to my doctor's office, and she does an internal exam, which I always tell people now are choices. You do not have to do that, but probably a lot of you are like me and just really curious. Are we actually in labor? Is the cervix changing? What's going on? So it turns out that I was, and she told me to go back home and to come back to see her when I could no longer talk through my contractions. And I was like, oh, sure, fine, no problem. And went home and called everybody, called my parents, let them know what was going on. Called my husband. He came home from work. I had a light lunch because I was hungry. And that's what I always tell people too, is definitely eat while you're at home and while you feel like it, because it'll keep your energy levels up. Anyway, long story short here, my husband is home. I am now pacing the living room and he's thinking like, okay, I think it's time to go to the hospital now. Meanwhile, I'm looking at him trying to talk through the contractions through my teeth. Like I can still talk through it though. Clearly it was more of a struggle. So we went to the hospital. I was about 4 or 5-ish centimeters. Can't remember that exact detail right now. But the point being is we did stay in early labor assessment unit for a little bit. We were brought upstairs to the labor and delivery floor. And because I had not enough, really any knowledge of what to do during labor, I assumed, okay, when you get to the hospital, you see those Johnny shirts on the bed. You guess you put those on. I guess I get in the bed. Someone's going to tell me what to do, right? They do this all the time. And they do it all the time. But they're not going to tell me to get up and do a double hip squeeze or walk around the room or do this or that. Sometimes they might have suggestions, but honestly, what I always teach in classes is that what you do during your labor and delivery is kind of up to you and taking that on. So I didn't know any of that. I laid in the bed with that Johnny shirt on and soon enough started getting even stronger contractions. So these contractions now, by the time I'm in labor and delivery, they are strong enough that they really are stopping me in my tracks, and I'm starting to feel kind of tortured by them because, again, I didn't know what I could do to help myself not only progress the labor, but also just to stay comfortable. I had no idea. So I was just lying down, letting those contractions kind of hit me like a wave. So I had heard about epidurals, of course. I had thought about getting an epidural before this, of course. My kind of game plan going into labor was just see how it goes. We'll go with the flow, we'll wing it, and do what we need to do when the time comes. And so because I didn't have any of that other knowledge or movement or breathing or all of that stuff that could help, I, again, was feeling pretty tortured by those contractions. And so I was kind of back and forth with my husband. I was talking to the nurse. We called a friend who is also a nurse to say like, okay, give me the pros and cons here of epidurals. I think I want one, but I'm nervous about it and all that stuff. Long story short there, got an epidural. 8 centimeters dilated, which was 8 p.m. on that evening. So I had been in labor for a while at this point, and the epidural gave some sweet relief, and I was able to get some rest. By the time I got to 10 centimeters, it was 10 p.m. So for anyone who's had an epidural, who's had a baby already, you know that they put it on a pump. So you're given this loading dose when the epidural is first administered, and then the rest, if you want to give yourself any more of the medication, it's on a pump, so you press a button. So I remember the first thing I asked was like, oh my gosh, don't give me control over this. Like I'm going to overdo it. They don't let that happen. They have a way to prevent that from happening. But anyway, so by the time we got to 10 centimeters and it's 10 p.m. and I had decided I was going to stop giving myself the epidural because I wanted to see if it could wear off a little and maybe get some of that feeling back for pushing. And so I stopped giving myself the epidural. But I also wasn't feeling the pressure or the need to push. Something else that was interesting about my labors were, for all three of them, the amniotic sac would never break on its own. For all three of my children, they had to artificially rupture the membranes. When I say they had to artificially rupture the membranes, you never usually really have to do that. That is a procedure that you usually do have a choice about. I didn't, again, have enough information or knowledge about the risks of artificially rupturing the membranes earlier, or what that could look like. I just figured like, hey, I figured they would break, and then that's how the baby comes out. Anyway, so there did come a point when I was 10 centimeters. We were waiting for that pushing phase. The nurse went to get a resident or a doctor to come in and do the artificial rupture of the membranes with the amni hook, which is a painless procedure. I've had it done 3 times, so I can attest to that. And I remember him coming in, and I remember him looking at me and saying, why are we doing this? He was questioning why he was in there to break the amniotic sac. And the nurse is saying, well, we want to get things moving again. So because when the amniotic sac is broken and amniotic fluid is able to come out, the baby is usually able to get lower into the pelvis, put more pressure on the cervix, hence feeling the pressure getting the baby out. So there was like some back and forth between the two of them. And I'm just looking like, I guess I want it. Like that's what my nurse is asking for. I didn't know. Anyway, I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. He did artificially rupture the membranes. Luckily, there were no issues. There's another interesting story about that with my middle child's birth, which I will share next time. But I found that interesting from the get-go that there was kind of that discussion/argument about it with the staff in front of me. And I'm kind of like, so do I want it? Do I not? What's going on here? So that a little interesting piece that luckily didn't morph into anything unnecessarily. By the time 12 o'clock rolls around, I'm almost finally asleep. And my nurse comes over and taps me on the shoulder and says, it's time to push. And let me tell you, that was tough. It felt like I was out of the situation. Like, I'm not in labor right now. I'm going to go to sleep. Like this, I was taking myself out of the labor mindset. And then it was like I was just being woken up to start pushing. And that was like a weird, oh gosh, where am I going to get this energy from? But I found it. I found some. Obviously, we started the pushing process. I found it really frustrating to be pushing, having had an epidural and not really feeling what was going on, because I was getting a lot of positive reinforcement from the nurse and my partner when I was pushing, but I wasn't feeling it. So I was like, what the hell? Anyway, all said and done, we were able to be in a few different positions, but ultimately, again, I didn't really know what to do there. And so I pushed for a long time. I pushed for 2.5 hours. And the epidural was still in effect for a lot of it. I was able to feel some pushes towards the end, which made me happy actually, because I was getting so exhausted, as you can imagine, with very little sleep, pretty much no sleep in a 24-hour period, and having pushed for a couple of hours. So when I was able to notice some feeling with those pushes towards the end, I feel like that really gave me that boost of giving some more energy, getting more power behind those pushes. And I did need an episiotomy, which was unfortunate. And I was kind of, before leading up to the labor, I think I was more worried about having an episiotomy than I was about anything else. And having had that experience now, I mean, I have a lovely doctor who was very supportive with that. And so anyway, all that to say is it just wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be at all. And it was necessary for the baby. So we did it and we survived. But once we didn't know the sex, we didn't know if she was going to be a boy or a girl. So there was that moment of, it's a girl. And I was waiting for that moment. I wanted that moment, but I was so exhausted that I didn't even register. And it took me a minute to be like, wait, is it a boy? Is it a girl? Like, what did somebody say? I was totally out of it, but also just in disbelief. I can remember being in the pushing phase and just I'm crying, feeling so incredibly frustrated and exhausted and feeling like there was no way on earth I was going to be able to do this. There was just absolutely no way. And then when she finally came out, I immediately said, like, it was just like a instantaneous, oh my gosh, that was so worth it. You know, that it takes so much out of you. But then once they're there, you get to have that moment. So we got to have some beautiful time skin to skin. She was healthy. I remember them measuring her head and them saying, oh, she has a big head. And I'm thinking, yeah, you're telling me. Yeah, she sure did. And this was our first, and this was several years ago. So we actually stayed at the hospital a little bit longer than you do now, but just a few days. And I can just remember it being such a whirlwind, that's the stuff that I don't remember as well is the immediate time that stay at the hospital and just being like, wow, we just did this. We just had a baby. Our road to baby, our first baby, was a long one, not as long as many, but also longer than many. And it took us a few tries to finally get this human being. And even the whole time while I was pregnant with her, I just remember thinking, like, this isn't going to feel real until she's in my arms. And then here she was in my arms. And wow, thinking back on it now, it will always bring tears to my eyes, because that's the miracle of birth right there. I desperately wanted my husband to come on this episode to share his experience. He wasn't into the idea. Maybe I'll get him sometime. But I wanted to share a little bit about his side of the story, because we didn't know how to help labor progress, or how he could help me stay comfortable. He had no idea. So he wanted to be supportive, and he could see me struggling with contractions, and would come over and have his hand on me and just be there for me. But because he didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what he could do to help me, and I didn't know how to help myself, I couldn't handle another person. It's like I had to worry about him too. So I would just be like, don't touch me, like, sit over there. I can't, like, it's not helpful. If you don't know what to do to help me, then everything else is unhelpful. And so he felt really helpless during that time, and even too during the birth of our second child, which that story will come out soon too, and that's a little bit more exciting. And so when he got to learn for baby number 3 some ways to help me stay comfortable and actually get hands-on with the support, it was a game changer. So I can't wait to share those experiences with you too. For now, I will leave you with the beautiful story of Stella's birth. I hope it was of some interest. Maybe you learned a couple things. Maybe you have questions. So please feel free to reach out anytime. Ashley at birthbabysleep.ca. You can find me at birthbabysleep on Instagram and Facebook. And reach out anytime if you have questions about the show, about your baby, about your pregnancy, about your postpartum, about sleep. That's what we're here for. And thanks for listening today. We'll see you back here next time. Looking for more? Check out birthbabysleep.ca, where you'll find prenatal classes, postpartum and new baby resources, and sleep support during the childhood years. You'll also find me on Facebook and Instagram at birthbabysleep. It would be awesome if you followed us wherever you listen to podcasts, and if you can, leave a review or a rating, which goes a long way for helping others to find us. That's all for now. I'm Ashley Cooley, and we'll see you back here next time.